it's Friday. We're trying to relax. All right. I think we're starting to get quieted down. Oh, Amy, Michael, you over there. You rabble-rouser. The perfect person for our finance work, the rabble-rouser. Thank you again for giving us feedback before we came into this conference about how much you wanted us to really address the moment, as challenging as it is in the current landscape with folks out there trying to dismantle DEI and EDI work. We've tried to run as much content as we could during this conference having to do with different areas of our work related to DEI or EDI, as some of us refer to it, including bringing our legal counsel into the ED group and having her present yesterday, talking about community-centric fundraising. And a lot of that stuff, in terms of the legal part of it, you know, can be a little bit of a downer. We're all having to deal with it. Today, I thought it might be very helpful for us as we all, you know, look at going back into our day-to-day roles to hear from Sophia Aktrap. Some of you may remember Sophia from the Moses Lake WAFL conference in August, when Sophia talked with us about equitable storytelling. And as you know, Sophia was the director of EDI with SBCTC and has been doing work with the Office of Civil Rights with the City of Seattle, and is now working on a regular basis with many groups in terms of helping them navigate the social justice landscape. So, Sophia, I am so glad that you're here today, and please give her a warm welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm so delighted to be with you all this morning. I do. But how do I use it? Okay, so fancy. Give me one moment. Let me pull this up just so I can have some notes in case. Okay, I'm so delighted to be with you all this morning. I got the privilege to be with some of you just this past summer when you all gathered in Moses Lake. And I'm laughing because as I was heading home, I got a flat tire and had to change all of my tires, so that was a very expensive trip. I didn't have to travel as far this time. I just drove by 5 from Tacoma. So again, so delighted that we're here together to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about what it looks like to navigate this moment we are in. And I want to just say that the moment we're in is not a new moment, but it feels maybe a little different, right? And so I hope this can feel generative. I hope it can feel like a conversation and an opportunity to imagine a little bit about what this work could look like given our current context. And I'm very cognizant that this is a system of 34 community technical colleges across the state of Washington, right? So what might work for the Seattle colleges or Bellevue might not work in Walla Walla or in Yakima or in Lower Columbia, right? And so I want to name that. I hope that anything that I share is not really prescriptive, but it's really meant to be an opportunity to dream and imagine and maybe take away a few more questions and tools to the work that you have ahead of you. Okay, so I want to ask, start us off with a question. Stemming from this idea from Emergent Strategy, if you've read work by Adrienne Marie Brown, for example, it's this idea that what you pay attention to grows. And so we can think about that like where we lend our energy is sort of where our time and our resources go, but it's also sort of like our spirit and our like emotional capacities for things, right? And so I want to start off this time together asking, what is it that you're paying attention to? Because what we pay attention to and what we practice is what, we might argue we become. So in just a minute or so, if you could think about what it is that you need to be present today. Maybe you name what's on your mind. I think that, I'm solo parenting for the next 2 weeks. So my mom is with my 7-year-old who has no school today. And so he barely woke up as I was leaving. He was like, "Do you have to go?" I was like, "Yes, I have to go." Goodbye. But what's on your mind right now? What's taking up some of your energy? And I think it's helpful to name those things because when we name them, we're not pushing them away, but we're noticing that that's something that's taking up space with us, right? And so just in the next few seconds, what is it that you need to be present today? Is it that you need to name that, yes, I have a ton of emails I have to get back to, but for the next, right? And I know we don't even have to ask that question. So there are things that are weighing on you. And can we, for the rest of this time together, until about 12 o'clock today, commit to naming those things and not ignoring them, but to try to find ways to be present together in this space today. And maybe what you need is another serving of granola, or the ketchup that was brought out earlier to go with your eggs. I didn't ask about hot sauce, but is there hot sauce? Yes. Okay, great. So what do you need to be present? Maybe you need to take a bio break, refill a beverage, whatever that is. Name those things, because I think when we name them, we can identify them, and then we can hold them together. Okay? Okay, part of what I'm going to share is not just maybe theoretical, lots of questions, no answers, but I do want to share some resources. So we know that these are challenging times, and we can name all the reasons why they're challenging. Financial austerity, all the budget things, ongoing wars and occupation locally and across the world. And we have to sort of work within all of those contexts and know that those exist in and around us. And so one of the things, strategies, if you want, I'd like to share is this acronym called PIES. I like pie. I hope some of you, maybe that'll be easy for you to remember. So PIES. P stands for physically. I have to read this again because there's one time where I flipped them and it didn't actually spell pie, so then it didn't work. So physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. So what are your PIES? And I think this is a helpful strategy as we encounter people or conversations or the doom scrolling that we might engage, to remind ourselves that we are whole people that feel and think and want to respond to a lot of things. And so this might help sort of do a scan with ourselves when we find ourselves in those moments. Okay, so once I will learn how to use this clicker. Okay, so P, physical, our physical body as well as our physical surroundings, right? These things that we can experience with our senses. So, I think that we maybe have been in spaces or have been socialized to be out of touch with our bodies, but we are embodied people, who exist in the world. And so maybe it's as you're reading the news, as you're hearing a piece of information about something that really is going to shift your work, you're like, okay, do a physical scan, literally, where am I holding this in my body? Are my shoulders tightening up? I have a colleague who used to be like, stop wearing your shoulders in your ears, right? You're walking around like this, not even knowing it. Or you wake up after a night of sleep and your jaw is sore because you've been clenching and grinding your teeth, right? So just do a physical scan, are my knuckles white because your fists are kind of clenching up? Where are you holding these things in your body? The I, I'm sorry, that's not how you spell pie. Yes, it is. I flipped it, see? I didn't change it. Okay, so it should be I. I was an English teacher too. Okay, so the I is intellectual, right? What are the thoughts, ideas, beliefs, ideologies? What's in your headspace? How are you rationalizing all these things and trying to make sense of them? The E is what is the emotional thing that's coming up for you? What are your feelings, moods, intuition, maybe your heart space? And then lastly, the S, spiritual, and that can be, I say that in a very agnostic way. So not necessarily a particular religious belief, though it could be, but it's really sort of where is your spirit? Where are your deep motivations? What is your gut communicating to you about this thing? Because I think oftentimes we can feel things and things well up for us, and then we're like, oh, but that's inappropriate here, I can't bring that up. And so whether or not you choose to act on these things, you're noticing them. And I think the noticing is part of how we build this world that we know can exist together, by naming and noticing what's coming up for us and not pushing it aside for respectability. Okay, so this is a tool practice you might choose to take on or share with others. Okay, thank you to the people who did not volunteer but who I asked to please assist in this particular activity. So There's a book called Rest is Resistance. It's by a woman named Tricia Hersey, who is a womanist theologian, and she's the founder of the Nap Ministry. And her whole thing is like, not just nap for the sake of like taking a, lie down in the middle of the day, but like that rest is our birthright. And so that is her whole thing that she builds off of this off. So on this side of the room, on this side of the room, there are a deck of cards called the Rest deck. What I want you to do, if you would indulge me, is rather than just pass the deck on, would you offer it in the spirit of generosity and reciprocity to the person next to you in whatever direction you want to go, you're welcome to, and offer them to take a card from this deck. And so this deck is 50 cards. You can buy it in many places. But it's practices to resist grind culture. And I can only imagine, as someone who works in this field of philanthropy and advancement and foundations, that there's a lot of grinding happening when it comes to like long 14 to 16-hour days, right? And so this is an invitation, at least today, to remind yourself that the movement, this work, does not require all of you to the point of exhaustion. So even if you only hear that one time today or this week or this month, let that be your invitation. So as these cards are being passed around, one side is an affirmation and the other side is a practice that you might engage. And you're welcome to keep these. Like, I brought enough for people to keep. If there's someone in your life you're like, I really need you to have one of these, take one for them, because there's enough to go around. And as those are being passed around, if you would just take a few moments and read them, right? One side will be, as an example, my body is sacred, exhaustion does not honor the sacred. And the other side is a practice that says, you don't want a seat at the table is full of oppressors. You want a blanket and a pillow down by the ocean. You want to rest, maybe it's a hammock. Or maybe you're like people in my family who naturally don't like the sun or the beach, and maybe it's like somewhere in a cabin. Exhaustion is not your legacy. Honor the divinity in yourself and turn your back on grind culture. You are sacred. So take one, keep it in a notebook somewhere. I have a friend, a colleague who actually is one of the diversity officers here in the state, in our CTC system, who takes these and puts them like in random places in her house in different books so that when she comes across them, she can be reminded of these things. Maybe you use this to kick off a meeting with your peers or your team, or even your board. But let this be an invitation to pause and to remind yourself that rest is not just important, but it is your birthright. Okay. How many folks have not yet received theirs? And again, you are welcome to take one for a friend and gently encourage them to rest and pause. Okay, I mentioned earlier as I started that where we are is not new, right? Where we are is not new. We have seen these headlines, and some of these headlines are from like 2004. Some of them could have been repeats of headlines from 4 to 10 years ago. So we have been here before, and yet it feels a little bit different. And I'm not going to rehash sort of the arc of all the ways that we got to this particular moment where we are in fear that the Department of Education is going to be dismantled, right? Among many other agencies that we were already seeing. But what I hope that we will hold sort of in tension with all of these things that we're seeing swirl around us is that we have a choice. And the choice that we have before us might not be the choice that we want in its totality, but it's still a choice, right? And so I know that we are perhaps constrained with a lot of different resources and also mandates, directives that guide the work that we do. And I think this is a moment for us to be really creative. And I wrote this on my hand because I was listening to a podcast on my way in, and this is the problem when you're like slated to speak, you want to keep adding things because you're like, oh, I think this is really important. Then you're like 20 slides, it becomes like 50. That's not what I did this morning, but I want to name, there's a podcast I was listening to, it's something like How to Survive the End of the World. It's with Adrienne Marie Brown and her sister. Lots of fun, interesting conversations, but she had on their strategist who talked about how, and we know this, right? Our nervous system, when it comes to moments where we are feeling attacked, and you can name what that looks like in a lot of different ways, that we freeze. Our nervous system just freezes. And I'm not, we don't need to be scientists, right, to be able to say that is true. And we can experience that sort of on an individual level and a collective level, that when we are feeling attacked, that we freeze. And I think this is a moment politically across the country that many of us are feeling that to varying degrees. And so we're seizing up because we don't know what the next right thing to do is. And we want to be caring and thoughtful in terms of what those responses are. And we want to be good stewards of the resources that we're given, which includes money, right, and investments. And it also includes the ability for some of our students to continue on that path in education. And so I think we're holding all of those pieces together, and we're in this moment of just like feeling immobilized, right? Not knowing sort of like what is the thing to do that's also not gonna get us doxxed, because there are people who are looking for our names and addresses and will show up to our places of employment or our homes to try to threaten us in some way. I mean, those are real, and it's not to, you know, not to scare folks, but I think those are the realities of like frontline staff in our colleges who are just there to answer questions for the public and to welcome them into the campus space, right? So all of these things we're holding together, and there is a natural tendency for us to sort of seize up and to freeze and not know what to do. And I think that in this moment we also have a really beautiful opportunity of creativity that maybe didn't exist before, right? And so I think about, you know, I'm like a 3-time alumni of the University of Washington. Go Dogs. And like I think about all the folks who are working to be like, hey, can you contribute, you know, whether it's the Alumni Association or anyone else calling. I mean, think of any organization that you're a part of when it's campaign season, right? And I think about the folks who are, maybe all they can give is like $5 a month, right? But they want to give $5 a month, and so what are the spaces that we're creatively offering and creating for folks who are like, I don't have a lot, but $5 is what I can give. Is there a place for me? And what does it look like if that's multiplied across your city, right? Across your communities, across the region, and what the invitation is for folks to feel like they could be a part of some kind of movement that invests in people and their educational pursuits, knowing that like they're never going to make 6 figures and might barely make $60,000 a year or $40,000 a year, but that there's a place for them in all of this too. And so I just want to offer and really name that this moment is calling for us to be creative, to maybe imagine partners and donors and investors and collaborators and co-creators that maybe didn't exist before, because I think the need was always there, but because we perhaps didn't see that the need was there and that the opportunity was there. Okay, so I have like, the thing with giving these presentations is like, how do you make it like interesting and catchy, but also like not so trite that it's like, did you pull these off the internet? So I'm just gonna name that, so please like bear with me, because I want it also to be something you can remember. And again, I'll share these with the team so that this can be distributed later. But so the first thing is like, don't lose the plot. And I think that, I'll go into this later, but we are super distracted people. I mean, how many of you have like started your day or ended your day just like scrolling, right? So that's real. And I think that the confusion and maybe the chaos and the anxiety that is being induced right now by way of executive order, I think what I read was like 1,000 in the last 3 weeks. Executive orders were signed, right? And so, again, notice that those are happening. Don't fully just like cause that for you to just bury your head in the sand and say like, this is eventually gonna go away. It may or may not, right? But to notice. And so ultimately what I want us to think about is like to not lose the plot. And I'll go into targeted universalism a little bit later. But here's sort of like a little bit of an overview of like where I want us to go. Okay, so don't lose the plot. We'll talk a little bit about targeted universalism as a path forward. And then I'll go over a little bit about how perhaps chaos and ambiguity are intentional, and to how do we keep the main thing, this idea that what we pay attention to grows, and that we ultimately are made for community, and that none of this is to be done on our own, even though we feel that it is and that we are. Okay, so I did a little a screenshot of some of the foundations within our system. So I pulled some of these out, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list. I literally was like, how many of our 34 community technical colleges have something in their foundation description that I can pull just to remind us sort of why we exist. So from the Seattle Colleges, as an open access learning institution, Seattle Colleges prepares each student for success in life and work, fostering a diverse, engaged, and dynamic community. From Lower Columbia, the foundation's mission is to provide financial support where public funds are insufficient and to gather support for enhancing educational opportunities. Bellevue College receives and manages individual institutional gifts. Our ultimate goal is to assist our students in their educational journey so that they can realize their goals and dreams. Spokane Colleges, when our community thinks of the foundation, they think of scholarships, and while that is a part of our work, we also support 20,000 students through emergency aid and provide program support to the 120 plus programs at both colleges. Big Bend, honor our role as a Hispanic serving institution, advocate for equity, inclusion, diversity, ... Okay, the reason why I'm sharing some of these, and this is just a tiny little sliver of the 34 that exist in our system, is this. There was a report, a very lengthy report, publication that was released in 2017 by a person named Christopher Moen, and it was through the American Association of Community Colleges, and it's something that you can download. Again, I'll include this in the resources that will be shared out. But the title of the report was When Less is More, Prioritizing Open Access. And in this report, he says, open access is the key tenet of the American Community College. All members of a community, not just a select few, are afforded a pathway to attain a college education, be it workforce training or through the pursuit of advanced degrees. And for some, this access to higher education serves to disrupt the cycle of intergenerational poverty and provide civic and fiscal benefits to both student and communities. So I want to remind us of the, really exciting opportunity that we have as members of this system of community and technical colleges, right? How many institutions can you name that serves the diversity of students who we have and community members who we have, right? When you think about someone who is like leveling up their skills because they need to perhaps bolster their English skills in their job, or they want to get a license of some kind, or they want to engage in continuing education because they're a grandparent now and they have a little bit more time, or someone who is on a transfer pathway, right? Like we have so many, story after story after story, of folks who, through the work of our community and technical colleges, have an opportunity to pursue some articulation of a life that they want to live, right? And we can be a partner in that. I mentioned targeted universalism because I was at the reception on Wednesday and I got to chat with some folks, and the conversations I think that are bubbling up around what language we can use, who we say we're serving, what these set of funds is going to help accomplish. All those conversations look different across the state. And I wanted to bring up this idea or this practice or this framework of targeted universalism as maybe a way forward that regardless of where you live in the state or in whatever political climate, this could be something that you explore. So this is from the work of the Othering and Belonging Institute by the person who leads this work is John Howell. And I'm gonna read it just in case the font is too small. It says, "There's a hunger for fresh approaches and urgent demand for novel policy methods that can break through our political gridlock, address the problems of our time, and create new avenues." I almost said adventures because, yeah, I think it's adventures too, for thriving individuals and communities. Targeted universalism is an approach that supports the needs of the particular while reminding us that we are all part of the same social fabric. And I would say that's a good definition of equity, right? Because we're not all using the same avenues to get to the intended outcome, because we know that not everyone's going to need the same thing. But we don't use equity sometimes, so we can talk about this instead. Because language is really important, right? And I think we're going to decide for ourselves when and where and how to use the language that we need to use. So I'm going to invite you all to kind of think about this at your tables, and if you don't have many folks at your tables and you want to join another one, feel free to move your chair and join another table. But this is the idea. So let me share a little bit before you all do this thing. So if an an organization like your foundation, like your college, like your district, is to engage in sort of this idea that like we're not just moving together, but like we're moving in the same direction because we're seeing the same thing on the horizon. And I think that's really important, right? Because oftentimes like we could go really wide and move together, but like we're going that way or like that way, and we're not sort of moving toward the same thing, and we're not able to name and articulate what it is on the horizon that we're trying to get to. So targeted universalism is an opportunity for organizations to create goals that are universal and aspirational in nature. And then, paired with that, implement strategies that are targeted to close that gap so that all people can get to that place that we've articulated and identified. Okay, and again, I think that's a beautiful example of equity. So if you were to think about what this could look like at your college and your institution, if you were to start with universal goals, like here, for example, right? So this is step one, universal goals, identify groups, identify barriers between groups and the goal, and then move into finding that distance between these goals and groups, and then create the strategies, and then kind of move it out into the world. And I'll be a little bit more explicit and give you an example of what that could look like, or what that sounds like rather. So an example, right? Here's another way of like thinking about that. So if targeted universalism allows for groups that are experiencing the greatest suffering, or we might say are furthest from justice, in this case educational justice, that they would receive more attention and resources while acknowledging that everyone has room to expand and improve in their outcomes, right? So I think the argument around DEI is that it's like reverse racism, or it's only serving a particular group. With something like targeted universalism, you are naming that we're all going to need different things because there are systemic barriers that have been put in place for a very long time that we continue to build off of. And if we can't name what those structures are, then we can't really begin to put together solutions that can name that and also get us moving to a place that we need to move to. So, and it benefits everyone, right? So another way to think about this is like, what are the meta goals or the goal of the goal, right? So another note on my hand. We were talking earlier, like, what's the question behind the question? What's the goal behind the goal, right? We can have stated things, but it's like, ultimately, like, what is the actual thing that we're trying to achieve if you can peel back the layers? So, for example, the Othering Belonging Institute did a case study with King County, right? And I thought this was apt since we are here in Seattle. So the county settled on a vision or meta goal of a King County where all people have equitable opportunities to thrive. So that could be your vision, like you can think about your vision statements, right, at the college or with the foundation. So for King County, it was a King County where all people have equitable opportunities to thrive, which aligned with, again, their goals for the county's larger strategic plan. Okay? So if you think again to this sort of thing, like think about your vision or think about the work that you're doing at the foundation. What is a universal goal that you all are trying to work toward through the work that you're doing at the foundation? If anyone's interested in like just sharing what that might be, that could be a place just as an example to offer to the group. I can wait. I will wait. I'm springing this on you, so I really don't want you to rush. And I think that, yeah, take a moment to think about what that could be. So another way to think about that is, again, what are the goals that are universal and aspirational in nature that implement, again, targeted strategies to close the gap between all these groups of people and move folks forward? Like, what's the vision on the horizon? A scholarship for every student. Okay, maybe one more? Free education. Okay, free education. Right, higher education? Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Eliminate barriers for students.
Eliminate barriers for students, right? Those are very big goals. And I hope that with that big umbrella and big goal, you can find very specific strategies on what does that look like for anyone who comes through, right, the campus, who is seeking some form of opportunity in education. Okay, so at your tables for just a few minutes, maybe like 5 minutes, talk through like what could this look like at your foundations. And if you're in a mixed group, that's okay. Like you can rock, paper, scissors, who's you want to talk about, or split the time in 2.5 minutes each. But just think about like what could this look like? What could some of those universal goals, the big overarching goals and vision, be as you think about naming that, and then perhaps what strategies you might create in alignment with the rest of your college and system to move those forward. take maybe one more minute to wrap up your ideas, and then we'll come back to the larger group. As we come back together and you finish your idea, your table, I would love to hear what some of the conversations were, just a couple share outs. How was this exercise for you? What came up as possibilities or barriers? And who were maybe some of the partners or co-creators that you might have identified? And I will run around with the mic if someone would like to kick us off. Yes, thank you. Hold on.
Hi, I'm Monique. I'm with Edmonds College Foundation. Just as like a getting started kind of thing, I think we could have used probably the full hour to work at this at our table. But one of the things, so we ran with as the main goal of just unlocking barriers, like overcoming barriers as a big goal. And then as far as the groups, both the second and third part, it was so interrelated, like an onion that you peel back and you continue to peel back and you see how complex this web gets, right? Because the barriers exist for the students and then maybe for their parents, for us, within the departments, communication barriers in general within the college and then within the community. And it just, I think that's where we sort of focused on in our conversation was just how complex this net gets and how we can really work on communication to collaborate more.
Thank you. And maybe that comes about because you talk to each other and do some work together, right? And as you peel back the layers, you realize that oh, we have so much interconnected, overlapping, interlocking work.
Hi there, Kirby Smith from Pierce College Foundation. And we were just talking a little bit by taking a step back and thinking beyond the scholarships and looking at the universal goals, which is ultimately economic freedom and financial agility for every single person in our community is something that we can kind of all get behind. And as it relates to that, those specific groups that are involved, obviously looking at the foundation as one, but then thinking beyond that, the college, the community partners, other community-based organizations, local schools. So that's something that we can all rally behind, but it also presents clear barriers to communication, resource barriers, knowledge gaps that are really clear and evident that makes that difficult for us to get behind. But I think just by being able to step back behind just kind of the what we do and just the why we do it, it allows us to think about common goals that are more universal for the entire community.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, I think about educational institutions and is our collective goal liberation? Is it abolition? What does that look like? How do our policies, practices, investment strategies, donor relations, cultivation line up with that, right? Thank you. Maybe one more? Is there anyone on that side that wants to share what some of the conversations have been? Okay, we'll pause there. Thanks y'all for engaging in this together. Okay, so we did this, but this is a conversation you can continue to have, right, at your institutions, and again, we'll share a bunch of resources. I think based on some of the conversations and things that are coming up here, I have a few more to add to a resource list. Okay, the other part is don't be an island, and I don't know, I come from the Philippines, so being from an island is just fine. Not given climate change, but right, so I say that in the context of we're not all self-made people. Like, we were not meant to be, right? And we know that our students are not, their families are not, they're coming from communities that are not. And so this is just a reminder that, like, as I said earlier, like, where we are is not new. You can name the political, white Christian nationalist landscape. You can name the social context. You can name just like all the things, right? And at the end of the day, we know that this isn't new. It might be new for us, but if we zoom way out, we know that some of the things that we're experiencing are not new, or observing rather. And like, sometimes it's also helpful to zoom out of the United States context, like all the way out, and just take a look. Like, the things that we're experiencing and noticing and bearing witness to here are also happening in different spaces all around the world, right? And have been for a very long time. We might just have been chose to make ourselves aware of it now, but regardless, what we're experiencing now is not new. And if we continue to act as though what we're experiencing and observing is new, we're going to repeat the same mistakes that have been made before. And so if we can just pause and be like, yeah, this is really crappy what's happening, or the S words or expletives, it's not great. And we know that there have been solutions to regimes, to takeovers of power, to all the things, then maybe we can be like, yeah, this is not great, it's not ideal, and we feel like we don't have choices. But at the same time, others have been really creative to find solutions in and through this, right? And I say that not to be dismissive and say like everything's gonna be okay and have that toxic positivity, because we have people literally being deported from Tacoma this week, right? And that's also a reality. And how can we look back and look forward, right? This idea of like Sankofa, look back, look forward, that there are things to learn that can guide us, that are moments of wisdom as we think about also how to navigate and live and thrive in the current space and climate that we are on. So I think a question for us to consider is, as we think about not doing this all on our own, or not shouldering all this on our own, even though we might come from offices that like have one person, right? And you're a director of what? And you don't feel like you have staff and support, that you can still think about like, who am I leaning on and who can lean on me, right? To further this idea of like mutuality, of kinship, of community. Who are you leaning on in this time, and who can also lean on you? Okay, I have until 11:15, right? Okay. Okay, so the last couple ones that I want to name, I mentioned earlier this tenet from emergent strategy about what we pay attention to grows. So if what we pay attention to grows, what are you growing given where your energy and your time and your commitments are currently going? Like, think about that for a moment, whether it's for you individually, and your family, collectively as an institution, or even within your office. What is it that you're paying attention to? And what are you growing as a result of that thing that you're paying attention to? And to further that sort of metaphor, what might you need to compost to feed what needs to grow? I am a wannabe gardener. My garden looks so bleak right now, but I'm gonna tell myself this is the season of like composting, let things have their season of rest and dying, because I know, like magic, and it is magic, I think, that in the spring things will begin to bud from what I did not believe was anything, right? And so, you know, a lot of the work of emergent strategy understands that there are interconnected networks that we can't see with the naked eye, but they exist and they support one another. Go to a forest and, you know, get down on your knees and kind of dig through there, and you'll see all the things that are thriving that we don't often see because of where we stand, right? So if you were to think about where your energy, where your resources, where your time are being invested, what is it that you're growing out of that? And I'm not even talking just about like material things, but like, what are the relationships and partnerships and ideas that are blooming out of this space that might not look like there's a lot there? And if we're gonna pay attention to where our energy is going, what are the things that you no longer need to be paying attention to? Maybe you could consider that, like, what are the distractions that are really not helpful in moving us forward in a direction that we said we would move? What are the ideas? It might be people, and I'm gonna pair that with, like, people are not compostable. I wanna say people, we don't throw people away. As much as maybe sometimes there are people that would want to, we're not doing that, okay. You do you. Oh, okay, we're not gonna get into the like, okay, we return to the earth and yeah, we're not, no. I'm not saying like, well, maybe. Do what you want with this, because I heard over here I do, and I was like, okay. But seriously, if we think about our energy and where we spend and move all of that, right? Like energy doesn't go away, it just gets rerouted and moved. Not into science or physics, my spouse is, but I know that to be true, even though I got a C in that class. Okay, so what are the things, ideas, things that people represent that need to be composted so that you can then move your energy into something else, right? What are those things? And whether it's practices that you have, whether it's the way that you run meetings, whether it's like the ways that you're thinking about who needs your help at the college and why they need your help, I think those are all valid questions to ask. So think about what that could look like. And then what does it look like to practice that? Because I think that's the other part. Like we could sit here all day long and talk about, ask questions and like theoretically talk about things, but then like a muscle, I use all these metaphors of things that I don't do. I don't work out. But I imagine that if we don't use things and don't practice things, whether it's building a skill, like you don't just become like an amazing cook. Like you gotta practice, you gotta tinker with stuff. You don't just get in a car and like stay in your lane, right? Like I mean, even people with years of practice don't. But you know what? What does this look like then in practice, right? Is it that you decide to speak up during meetings, say like, hey, we keep saying this, but I don't think we believe that. What are the things that we need to practice if we believe this, if we want to try to do this? What does it look like in practice? And I think one of the questions I always invite people to ask is, what does the thing, whatever that is that you're trying to work out, what does it look, sound, and feel like in practice? What does it look, sound, and feel like for our students, for our colleagues, for our staff and faculty and administrators? What does it look, sound, and feel like to do this thing? So if we wanted to, at some point, right, implement free community college. It exists in some spaces, right? There are different mechanisms that already exist in the state and in the city. But if we wanted that thing to be universal throughout the whole state of Washington, throughout the whole country, what are the practices that we might need to engage to begin doing that thing? And it might be small, right? It might just be like, we're gonna keep asking, why is it not possible, right? Because we can't keep asking that question 10 years from now when we haven't started to make the little moves that are necessary to bring us to that place. Like some things can happen overnight, but not everything, right? And so how in our tenure in these roles can we move in such a way that is aligned with your own integrity, with the mission vision of the college, or the goals that you all have set out in your foundations, to say that, you know, in my 10 years here, this is what I tried to do, and there's evidence of it, right? And I think that, so right now I work for the city of Seattle, and there was a court case that was just won against someone who claimed that DEI training was like discriminatory. And the case ruled, I'll include this in the resources too if you want. The case ruled that though it is uncomfortable, it's not discriminatory, right? And there's now evidence of that because people decided to document that in their practices, policies, trainings, activities. So like if you were to, this is an activity I do sometimes, if you were to look like 10, 20, even 50 years down the road, and there was like some publication that was celebrating the work of your college through the work that you did there, what would they be celebrating? And what was the path that it took to get to that point of celebration, where the universal goals that you had outlined were a thing that you accomplished, right? So there's a lot of like future thinking, imagining, but I think if we cannot radically imagine without constraint the world that we want to live in, the colleges that we want to have, the experiences that we would like students to have to be able to pursue the things that they want to pursue, it's really hard to forge a path to get there because we can't even name it, we can't even articulate it. And it's gonna take, I think, all of us, right, in partnership with everyone, that we are moving and aligned, maybe not moving at the same speed, but certainly pointing in the same direction, right, to get to that thing. Okay, I just have this is really the last thing, and I'm, again, looking for things that like might be helpful for you to remember. So don't be distracted. I know that's a easier said than done kind of thing because there are a lot of things that distract us. Again, like there's lots of things that kind of hook us in and we just end up getting fixated and stay there. But if we think about the 4 C's, chaos, which is what we're experiencing in media now, right? Whether you're on social media or any news cycle, it's like a 24-hour news cycle that didn't exist before. So there's chaos, which then contributes to like confusion because it's like, well, what news outlet do I believe? Or like, who is the trusted source where I can at least like know that like what I'm seeing or hearing is something I need to pay attention to or dig further on my own, right? Which then causes like cognitive overload because we either like keep going because we're just like, oh, but let me find another angle to the story, or we're just like shut down and we want to just like take a nap and put my head under the covers. And then the last is constitutional challenges, and I was laughing because Michael was like, I don't know if I can get past that last one, but, and I should have started from the beginning. I know you all had like, you have your relationships with your attorneys, and you had someone speak yesterday, and I'm not that. But I do think that part of the distraction and the confusion and the overload is because we're like, we have this thing called the Constitution. I don't know a whole lot about it because we got like 1 semester in college. What should I know about it? Who should I listen to know what I should know about it? And I think it's like chaos and distraction by executive order, right? And so it's like, again, name the thing, and also be like, okay, well, what agency do I have to engage in that? Or to educate myself, to educate my peers and my colleagues, and even students around that, right? I know that one of the things that I'm hearing continue to be something that comes up is like a know your rights, especially as ICE is engaging in so many spaces in very deceptive ways, right? What's the line that we can hold that is not going to put our employer at risk or myself at risk? And I think even the understanding of risk is relative, right? Because as a US citizen, your risk is different than someone who's not. Or your skin color is different than someone who's not, right? And the risks that are going to either be sort of immediately present or later are gonna look different. And so, but have you had those conversations, I think is the better question, right? And how are you feeling supported in those decisions? Yeah, like so my kid is in 1st grade and he's in the Tacoma Public Schools, and I spoke at the school board meeting last month because I had not heard a single thing about whether it was guidance on what to do when ICE comes to your campus, or whether it was, here are beliefs and our values as an organization, as a school district. More is forthcoming, but at the very least, here are places where you can get resources, including national and local, right, organizations. And then the neighboring school district had already adopted a board policy to say that they will limit engagement with ICE, right? So there are different ways that you can enter this. And I think one of the things that if you are glued to your screens that you'll keep hearing is like, do not comply in advance. And again, what that looks like and the risk involved in that is gonna look different across the state and depending on who your leaders are and the conversations you have. But I think it's, again, if we are going to be good storytellers, if we're going to be good stewards of the work that we are called to do in these particular roles, then we will not just bear witness to what's happening, but be a part of the conversations in what it looks like to continue to have thriving spaces where our students feel like they can show up as their full selves. Okay, I'm going to end with this, and the font is a little funky, so I will, actually, does someone want to read this out loud? It's 3 slides, I'm going to give you that warning in advance, okay. If you could read it out. This is from the book, The 4 Pivots, like how I just told you that, 4 Pivots by Sean Ginwright.
3 slides, right? He's like, all right. The bottom line is that we all have these obstruction spots that make it difficult to connect with each other in meaningful ways. These obstruction spots also make it difficult for us to cultivate a vision of the world we really want to live in. Most of our work is focused on eliminating those things that cause us harm. Addressing racism, fighting sexism, and reducing violence are all important, but reductions in these things are not victories in and of themselves, because eliminating these things that harm us is not the same as creating things that heal us. Just like the absence of disease doesn't constitute health, nor does the absence of violence constitute peace. Simply ending these problems does little to cultivate the world we really want. But that is how inequality works. Inequality erodes our ability to imagine any other way, and it conditions us to only focus on surface solutions to deep problems. It predefines our dreams and dictates what we can imagine. That's why so many of us have a hard time describing what freedom feels, looks, smells, and sounds like. We haven't spent much time with that type of question, and sometimes find it difficult to visualize a world we want to create.
That was the inspirational part of this talk. But really, JK. I was trying to make it tiny font, so it's 4, not 3.
Okay. We spend all of our time resisting white supremacy, fighting racism, confronting patriarchy, deconstructing capitalism, challenging oppressive systems, and very little time creating belonging, cultivating healing, inventing new systems, designing our future.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the invitation then in our 30 seconds left is what is the future that you want to design together? And it's not just going to be done by people in this room, right, or people on Zoom, but it's going to be done in partnership, in co-creation, in collaboration, in true community with those who are going to be most impacted and furthest from justice. And I think organizing and movement work would remind us that those who are closest to the thing that you're trying to address also probably have the best solution. So how are you bringing them in? How are you pulling up extra seats to the table so that this is not done in a vacuum and it's not handed off to say, here's the plan, what do you think? But that from the beginning that we are designing any sort of work that we do, any solutions that we do in partnership and collaboration with those who will ultimately be most impacted, but possibly also benefit the most from our work. So this is my contact info if you want to be like, hey, what was that thing you said? I will happily respond, have a conversation with you. But I appreciate so much your time and your engagement and your energy and your thoughtfulness as you all continue to co-create the world that you know can be possible. Thank you.
That is a hard act to follow. Sophia, thank you so much. And we are going to segue into our last phase here of the conference. I do have one thing to share, which is that Dr. Rosie Raimondo Cherensop, our chancellor, will not be joining us, and maybe that's okay. She needs to take care of herself right now. And I say it's okay because I think we can use this time when we're going to focus on some hot topics to really build on the discussion that Sophia has so beautifully set up for us. And I know that typically, and at least the last time I attended, we did hot topics by talking around the tables, but I would like to keep the group together. So I have asked my colleagues, Michael Beneke, our Director of Communications, and Emma, to help us navigate the conversation. So Michael, I don't know if you're ready.
Take like a 3-minute break just so
Okay, how about that? How about we take a really quick break and we'll come back. But the idea is to look at our hot topics and to talk about the high level and then practical things that we can do together. Back. We've addressed our technology issues, so if we could get everybody to come back and just for another half hour, folks. And this is important because this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So, all right. We're going to address some hot topics. And my colleagues here, Michael and Emma, are going to assist me. We're going to work as a team here. We had a few technical problems, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to show you the board. You know, you spent time during the conference posting hot topics with post-it notes and letting us know what's on your mind. What I would like to suggest, and we will get to the specifics here in a minute, is that we look at our work together moving forward from a couple of different perspectives. One is the wider perspective of how we movement build together as CTCs across the state of Washington, maybe build some tools. You heard Wing Yu yesterday talking about data. If we develop some strong case points, some tools, et cetera, that all of us can use and really start standardizing advocacy approaches, et cetera. That's one level of movement building. The other is to address both professional development and functional, operational area needs, because many of you want to know how to do alumni things, or how do I approach X, Y, and Z in my work, and we want to address that as well. So, Michael. Yeah. Michael has been trying to solve this tech challenge, and so I don't know if you know what a big deal it is just to see this on the screen right now. But Michael, here's the, I know, it's hard to take your eyes off of it now that it's up there, but here you go.
Yeah, so thanks to Emma for trying to group the various suggestions for topics that we should go into. So there was a cluster here that related to kind of management of oneself, especially in the context of busyness, and then presumably also just the broader sort of climate that we're operating in right now. Also questions around holding on to staff. We heard, at least I heard in workshops that I was part of, how difficult the churn in staff can be in terms of really getting traction and getting the work fully going and accomplishing all that we can. There were issues about managing up. I think we probably all grapple with those at times in terms of like getting the folks who work on the administrative side of the college to share our vision, or like give us a vision that we can also get aboard with and make this sort of philanthropic endeavor a priority. And then additionally, there were questions which are probably unanswerable at this time, but with respect to technology and AI in particular, and where that's going to take us in terms of not just the way that we do our own work, but the effects of AI within our institutions, and what they could mean for the programs of the future, and how we go about selling those to students and to donors. So I don't know if there are folks in the room who want to share an insight in any of these, maybe starting with like managing oneself, dealing with, and we don't have to go into these, all of them, but maybe the retention one is one that folks would have something to speak to. Like, do you see things that are working in terms of attracting good people, keeping good people, so that we can get that kind of longevity with our staffs? We don't, and I think our approach with these hot topics is if we can get good answers in the room today, awesome, and if not, we're going to like, talk about them through our listservs and talk about them through future conferences. These may not be answerable or perfectly answerable right now. So the retention question, yeah, that's a great.
I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Jennifer Woolworth with Pierce College Foundation. So, and I don't, as I've talked with other colleagues, in the room over time. I've been at Pierce College Foundation for a little under a year, but when I came in, the entire foundation had been decimated from times before, and so it's a rebuilding time, and just hearing how many interims there have been and failed searches, and not just within the foundation, but college system-wide as an issue. So retention is top of mind for both the college and the foundation.
Anyone want to speak to that? Yeah.
I would say from my experience starting at Grace Harbor College, it was kind of the same thing going in, having a lack of executive director stability, but a lack of processes. And so it just creates this swirling unknown of how to get the work done, right? Because there's no structure to the work. And when I also started, we just had boxes and boxes of paperwork. Nothing was digitized. So the way, before I even really started working with donors, is I knew I had to get the actual operations of the foundation of the foundation is what I actually call it, solidified and strong so that we could actually operate within the built systems. Because I think when people keep running up against inefficiencies and frustrations, it just causes more burnout, and people find it harder to make that forward progression, to see that we're making it, we're moving the needle. They just feel like they're stuck and never ending. I'm not saying that that's what's happening in your organization, it totally is. And my board often asks me, they would challenge me, why are you focusing on taking care of scanning all this documentation? Well, a few years later, a thing called the pandemic happened, and we were in a great place to fully go remote. But those systems and moving that needle forward each and every day has just got us to this place of just absolute trajectory. And then I only have one staff member, but it has been completely investing in her and her education and building her up, because I know that the stronger she becomes, the stronger I become, and the more successful our organization becomes.
I don't know if this is a proven method yet, but we, 2 years ago this spring, our ED left, and it was before my time, and 2 of us came in new about 1.5 years ago, and then we just restructured again. As we all do, we keep changing the dashboard and the charts. So we, as a development team, so we now have finance and operations in our office, and then we have the development team, and we kind of mapped out everything that has to get done, and then where does everyone align and what needs to get done. And so I often talk with my director of development of, what's your dream job? What's your dream job here? Because she's coming up on 19 months and she's probably gonna leave pretty soon. So how do I keep her? And what is her dream job? She loves being out in the public. She loves doing presentations. She loves meeting with Rotaries and civics groups. So how can she do, events are fun and all, but she also likes this part. So how to keep inspiring her to do those things while doing the day-to-day grind that we don't always want to do. And then I have a development specialist who loves communications, but she needs to be out fundraising half the time. So how do I keep her intrigued through grants, through some articles in community papers? So just kind of getting creative with that and matching it to the person while also realizing those people aren't going to be there forever. So there's some flexibility of, I'm not going to find that unicorn again. So being agile in that way, but being really honest. My development director, she usually stays 2 years at places. I usually stay 3 years. So how do I keep her invested and excited? And we keep coming back to, what's your dream job? At most of our one-on-ones even, so that she stays engaged.
Great. So acknowledging that people won't stay forever necessarily, but making the work as interesting and as rich and providing as much stretch opportunity, professional development is what Lisa was talking about. Great ideas.
I think the biggest thing, I'm not a director or anything, so just take this with a grain of salt. The biggest thing, Okay, fine. Listen to me, because I'm an employee. Okay, so I would say, yeah, okay, Heather. Well, this is what I'm going to talk about. I would say at the colleges, obviously, there's a ton of people who work there. There's a lot of complicated relationships. In the foundation office, when I first came into the foundation full time, there were some tense relationships, a bit difficult to want to go into work and have to sit in that cubicle space and do that. And while those situations were resolved on their own, and our office now is a place where people feel welcome, people thank each other for the work we do, we apologize if we make mistakes. I wanted to host my foundation family for a housewarming party because I just love them all so much. And that's because the toxic relationships that we did have, which are not fun to talk about because it's really uncomfortable to say, hey guys, the vibe in this room is really weird, we need to address it. That was the biggest thing, that when that changed, I was like, I feel like I'm gonna be here forever because I love, love, love the people I work with, and I don't feel nervous every day going to work that I'm gonna get in a fight or something.
Love that. The one over here.
Thank you. I'll bring up one thing that's along these lines, and that is what we're hearing back and forth is going to work 5 days a week versus 3 days a week or whatever. That's coming up more and more. And I do think that's going to affect how people want to either stay at your college or university or work, whatever they might want to be. One of the challenges is that we don't pay well. We simply do not pay well. And so people are out there looking for good reasons. I've asked myself many times, are people here for the job, the mission? And some people just come for the job because the facts are they have other things. It's just paying their bills. So how do we support that? That's all they want. So we have to really think about that aligning with their mission. But again, I do go back to the thing that's really right in front of me right now, and that is 3 days versus 2 days and blah, blah, blah. Our college has been talking about going. Dr. Singh sends a message every so often about the different organizations that are going back 5 days a week. So the message is there. The message is there, I think. And so with that in mind, I'm thinking we're going to eventually go maybe even 4 days a week, maybe. It's going to happen. But what, luckily, I think the freedom I have working with Dr. Singh is like I can work with my team and say, what works for you and how do I support you in the work you need to do? So I think it comes right down to the equity question again. And that's going to help maybe. But we also have to realize that some people are there simply for the job and they have different passions. So how do you even work with that?
I just want to echo what you just said, that I think a certain amount of flexibility in office hours or whether or not we report to work 5 days a week in the office or have the flexibility to work at home, I think that's a very important benefit that we don't want to overlook. I think for a lot of us, we work evenings, we work weekends, we stay up late, we do things on our own time. We put in a lot of time and effort, and we don't get any breaks. We don't get the hiatus that the faculty do, for example. So I think that being focused on equity and what it is that employee needs. If you've got somebody with children, if you've got somebody that has an illness, if you have somebody that's neurodivergent, that needs something different, I think it is beholden on us to the extent possible to make those accommodations.
Yeah, thank you, great points. Resonated with me as a parent. Do we want to move to it? Oh, okay, but then let's take one more and then let's move on to the getting the managing up thing, how to get college leadership to be more visionary. I think maybe the person who asked that could elaborate a bit after we hear from Andrea.
I think a part of the conversation also is different generations, right? Starting to come into the workforce, and so I used to be the young kid, not so much anymore. So understanding and realizing that there's a difference in how work is done, and the expectation of how that work is done, and reframing your own personal bias as to what that means. Like, are you having a reaction to what this person, if they do their best work. For example, I have a database person who she does her best work if she could put earphones in and be in a corner and nobody bother her, right? Because if somebody bothers her, she's got this gigantic export she's been doing that now she has to like go back and redo again because you just came and interrupted her. So how can we work with people and how they work best, not how our systems impose upon them that dictate they should work. And that's something that's very, very important for the younger generations coming into work.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Is the individual who asked the question about how do you get college leadership to be visionary and think bigger, is that person here? Maybe they're a South Ender going to go. That's you? Oh, okay. Say a little bit about that and maybe we can do a little brainstorm.
Well, it was the gentleman from Rwanda that mentioned that they don't think big enough, for example. A lot of times when I connect with faculty in particular, and I ask them, okay, we've got this grant opportunity, what do you want to do? You've got the opportunity to write for $25,000, what do you want? What can we do? It's always very small and very basic. We need this equipment, we want to, and then we have other faculty who are envisioning new centers of excellence, and so I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to teach our faculty and leadership how to dream bigger and create visions for creating opportunities that folks can invest in. And maybe that is, more the job of the college leadership and to be able to do that, but we have to fundraise for something, and if it's a big vision, it's so much easier.
Thank you. Kerry, do you want to say a word or two? You came to mind.
Actually, Michael, you came to mind. And the reason I say this is because we absolutely have that issue at the Seattle colleges. And having come from, I think I mentioned it on the first day, but four-year institutions where that was not as much of a problem, it was a new challenge for me. But what I'll say is that our most recent and probably largest challenge on that involved a very small team of us. We're up to 17 now, but I think it was just, it was less than 7 at the time that we were doing this. And we had a really big opportunity with Amazon. And they wanted to start a new BS and computer science program with us. And we then had to pull our faculty members along, because even though the opportunity was big, they didn't really, they hadn't thought that big before. Like, what does it mean? And actually, Amazon still has a bigger vision than what they funded, and that was to really catalyze, I think, BS programs across the CTCs, right? Yeah, and SBCTC got involved in WSOS, but I look at Michael when I say this because he and I had to build trust very quickly. So what I would say is I wouldn't say do as we do, but maybe take some lessons that we learned along the way and apply them if you can, and that is that the trust building is so important, but you'll always find, you're not going to bring everybody along with you, and even in 4 years, you will always find your, what I would call early adopters, or people who are just very visionary and entrepreneurial by nature, and you find those folks, and you build those relationships internally, and you brainstorm, and you dream, and all of that. You get beyond the folks who'll say, are you gonna pay me a stipend, right? To sit with you in the room for more than an hour and talk about an idea, right? Because they're used to responding, being very reactive to RFPs. at the community college level, not about going after centers of excellence or X, Y, and Z. And even if they do think about centers of excellence, they're thinking, I have a great idea, now you go out and raise money for it, right? So it's not a fast process. We're still doing it. Even though we have the funding, we are still working with the faculty, and there is a tendency to hoard resources and eke them out and hire one faculty member and build a boutique program and all of that. It's very difficult to help them understand that had they grown faster, that Amazon would have put in more money, right? They have a hard time taking that risk and being entrepreneurial. So we're still doing it, but I will say that the trust building and finding your, I hate to say this, but stars and your early adopters is really the key.
Any other perspectives, yes?
Thanks, Michael. So when Paul Rucker was here yesterday, and he invoked the name of Dan Evans, so when Governor Evans led Washington in envisioning our community technical college system, it was a system that could be responsive to our community. Not a system to be modeled after our four-year research and regional universities. I think that over the years we've fallen in this trap that we've tried to emulate our four-year brethren rather than staying true to our mission of being responsive to our communities. And add to that what we just heard in our wonderful session that we just talked about all the, the noise that's getting thrown at us that in some ways could be seen as purposeful distraction to keep us from our actual mission. Because by God, what would happen if we actually succeeded in doing what we want to do? So what we need is we need that ability to get, I serve on our executive leadership at our college, so I'm amongst these people I'm talking about. We need to find a way to remember, pull ourselves out of those issues that have been plaguing us since 2019 of how to deal with an athletics thing that we talked about this morning, or hey, what are we going to do about summer hours? We've answered those questions, right? We've answered the parking, we've answered the question. Let's just stick to what we've decided, make decisions we can follow, so that we can actually dream big and work and be responsive to the community. So when the Amazons come calling, or when our community members come calling with a need, that we're actually in position to follow. And in the first two examples, I heard a lot about the faculty, and I want to have all the respect to the faculty, but people are going to look to the leadership of the college. They put a lot on the leadership of the college, and it's easy for us to say, oh, but we have these 5 agenda items that we have to solve today before we can talk about that. And we really have to flip that dynamic and talk about it. So, and foundations often are that in, because if you can get a president in the room with community members and they start talking about resources, then the light bulb will go on. But the key is it's beyond just that one meeting. It's like having to be consistent and have that message again and again and again. And community members who demand accountability, so like at your board meetings, how come we haven't done that yet? How come we haven't done that yet? And I know that makes it sound like it makes our work harder, but actually cultivating our board to really be that community voice and being willing to have the courage to ask those questions. I thought, where's Nick? There we go. I thought no, good, in a good way. The great part about the way that you're structuring those financial reports is it's providing the data so that they can stop taking time asking those questions again and again, so that you can get through that and get to the big discussions. So anything that we can do to kind of eliminate the distractible things and actually have the big discussions, especially when we can get the presidents and the leaders and folks together to talk, then we can actually move forward on those big ideas.
Thank you. And we're realizing that we're coming up on time here, so maybe, Emma, if you could just bring up the next couple of slides quickly, we can just talk about the issues we want to go on to address through the listservs, through other ways as we were discussing. So these concerns related to, like, especially in a small shop and getting a campaign going, perhaps where do you start, what kinds of prioritization are you going to give to different kinds of potential donors, corporates, for example. There's an interesting question that I think deserves a lot more discussion, which is how could we not only increase corporate support for our individual colleges, but maybe as a system start to engage with corporations, some of the bigger ones, and get some support structuring across all of them. It's not dissimilar to what Puget Sound Energy has just done in terms of establishing that new scholarship program that they have, which was talked about on day one. And then an interesting question about supporting small programs, small project needs that always pop up at our schools. My colleague Andrea, who spoke, has gotten something really interesting going that maybe she can talk about in another context involving basically team fundraising, using an extension of the Blackbot tool that we use, and it's going to be kind of democratizing the process of starting up a small-scale fundraiser for different teams and groups. I'm sorry. Crowdfunding, that's the term. Yeah, thank you. Could we go to the next slide, Emma? And then here, I think a lot of these questions hopefully got answered in the great alumni session that Tom Bull was doing. But just a lot of queries about how can we organize our alums, great ideas about how can we, after we've organized our alums at our individual schools, maybe get a group of those alums from across the state to be an advocacy force, for example, down in Olympia. I think that's a super potent idea. And then questions about how, as a group of community college advancement professionals, we can just really regularize this process of sharing resources, knowledge, inspiration. And that's a wonderful thing about this thing that's got me going.
And that's a great segue. So I want to get you out on time, and my question for the group is back to my earlier comment and not losing the plot, as Sophia advised us not to do. And we are, and I love islands. Could we be the San Juans maybe, where we are beautiful and collective. And I am wondering, and I'm going to just put this out in front of the group. I know the EDs have agreed to have a call once a month, which I think is going to be very helpful in pulling this together on a regular basis. Would you like to continue in terms of addressing some of the operational and functional areas that you all work in, to do regular trainings, discussions, webinars in between these in-person conferences? Is there an interest in that? Yes, okay. So I would love to bring that back to the EDs and talk about that, because I think we can pull resources and share some resources and learning. The other thing in terms of practical resources, and Tom, I don't want to step on, or anyone else who was involved with this, and that is the Google Shared Drive. I don't know how many people are accessing that, and if we just need to increase awareness and access to that, so that we have it organized in such a way and that we are promoting it in terms of the go-to spot for resources. Okay. We will put the PowerPoints. Give us a couple of weeks post this conference, because there are things that we have in our hands right now and things that we want to organize and develop and get to you. And Jen Kennedy, who was here yesterday, is off today for about a week with her family, and she will follow up with many more resources to post. So we really want you to carry forward some of the knowledge that you got here, the relationships that you've built or strengthened during your time here, and please keep communicating with us to let us know what you need, whether it's to your ED or to the wider listserv that we have, because we want to keep this momentum going that I think that we've built here in the room over the last couple of days. Any last closing comments? I do have a couple more housekeeping things, but Oh, yes. Grace Harbor? do you have anything? Should I give you the mic? Do you want to talk about it for a minute?
Okay, I'm gonna want to have you all out at Grace Harbor. I just got to go through one hoop to get my president to approve it because we are not allowing any outside activities right now because our staffing is really tight. So we're a small shop, but I'm gonna push hard to have you guys out in Aberdeen this year because during the summer, our area is just absolutely gorgeous, and then you might be able to extend your trip out there for a weekend stay out at the beach or something. It's a beautiful community to come into, so yes, fingers crossed.
Thank you. I can hardly wait. The housekeeping thing. So make sure that if you parked in the west parking garage over here, that you get a blue chaser ticket out on the front table. And for those of you who enjoyed the food and aren't able to take it with you, you'll be pleased to know that we are donating our food to some of the homeless folks in our community down the street. So it wasn't wasted. And I keep thinking there was something else that Mandy wanted me to say. Nick, did you? Not for you?
I just wanted to say, I forwarded a link to the listserv about the Department of Revenue. Yes, thank you. And if we're auditors in the video, so if you're interested. That was my practice. I forwarded a link from our auditor partners BDO to the listserv, and it's to join on February 27th, I believe, to discuss the current ruling for the B&O tax on investment earnings. So I will be there and hope to see whoever is in the area also there.
Kerry, just on behalf of everybody that's here, to you and all of your amazing team that surrounds you, thank you all for hosting us. Yeah, everybody from Seattle Colleges, at least stand up and be recognized. I think we all can recognize how time-consuming events can be, and you guys just knocked it out of the park. This was just a wonderful experience to come to, and we're so just grateful for everything you did for us. This is from the speakers to the food to the venue. My goodness, it was wonderful, so thank you.
Seriously, we were so happy to do it, and we were underground for the last few years from our startup. That coming out last year to the conference at Edmonds, thank you, Tom, we thought it was time to show our faces, and then we made up for it by deciding to host one of these. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And I cannot believe that our team would not come up here, but I could see, even from here, their red, blushing faces. So, you know, I want you to embarrass them just a little bit more. So anyway, thank you. We couldn't be prouder and more honored, honestly, to have you in our space and to share what we can in terms of whether it's space or resources or knowledge or contacts, and we really are serious about helping with both tools, resources, and movement building. Seriously, it is a critical, critical time. And though Dr. Rosie couldn't join us, what she would have said is how important our work is for the entire state of Washington, our collective work. So, everyone, please go out and enjoy your Valentine's Day. And I hope it doesn't snow. I don't think it's supposed to. But we really, there's just such a feeling of warmth and love from all of us to you. So thank you.